Okay, hi students, how are you guys doing? Okay, so last video you seen that two videos. The first video was in the classroom I was teaching, and how did the sine inverse existed, and we seen how the restricted domain of sine made it to get our domain and range for the inverse function. And then also we seen the second video is why sine inverse of negative of x is minus sine inverse of x. Today in this video, I'm just trying to say what is cosine inverse of x? How did this cosine inverse exist? And then what is the domain of cos? So two things, what is cosine inverse of x? And then we need to know what is the domain of this. We need to know what is the range. And then also we need to see what is the graph. And then also we need to know why cosine inverse of my negative x is pi minus cosine inverse. Back to in the beginning, remember the definition of what is cosine and sine for any angle. So here is a unit circle. If there is a circle with a center at the origin, and if there is a point, any point on the circle, and if you have x and y coordinates, you can drop a perpendicular, get a 90 degrees, and for any angle theta, let's see, this is theta, whatever that angle theta, and you can see x is always cosine theta, x is cosine theta, y is sine theta, because if it is sine of theta, this is the opposite over the hypotenuse, so the opposite is the y. If it is cosine, it's the adjacent over the hypotenuse, so that's the x. So that's why x is cosine theta, y is sine theta, and tan is y divided y over x. Now right now I'm focusing only on this, so x. Now if you see the big unit circle right here, it has what are so the first thing is I've taken all the angles multiple of 30s. So if this is 0, then 30, 60, 90, 120, 150, 180, 210, 240, 270, 300, 330, 360. And also I wrote in terms of angle pi by 6. 2 pi by 6, that's pi by 3, pi by 6, that's pi by 2. 4 pi by 6, which is 2 pi by 3, 5 pi by 6, 6 pi by 6 is pi, 7 pi by 6, so that's, then 8 pi by 6, which reduces to 4 pi by 3, then 9 pi by 6, which reduces to 3 pi by 2, then 10 pi by 6 reduces to 5 pi by 3, 11 pi by 6, and then back to 12 pi by 6. So that's how we also know, seen that how do we, what is that, this number, first number stands is the cosine. So if this angle is, so if this angle is 30 degrees, so that's the terminal side, that's the initial side. So for that, it's root 3 by 2. So that's why I say, so let me take the positive one first, that 0 is 1. So this number is cosine, this is cosine of 0, which is 1, and is right here, cosine 0 is 1. Then cosine of 30 is root 3 by 2, which is root 3 by 2. So the first numbers on all this point, any point, the x coordinate is always the cosine of whatever the angle. So cosine of 30 is root 3 by 2, cosine 60 is half, cosine 90 is 0, sorry, cosine of 90 is 0, there you go. Then cosine of 120 is minus negative half. That's because in the second quadrant, the x coordinate is negative, so that's how you can remember that cosine of 120 is negative. Then cosine of 150 is, and I missed a minus here, this should be minus root 3 by 2. And this value, what I did was, 30 is root 3 by 2, 60 is half, 90 is 0, 120 is minus half, 150 is minus root 3 by 2, and your back here is, this is cosine of pi, which is 180 degrees. Okay, now I picked up only a few of this because for the, if you check the previous video, I chose the same negative 90, like I chose this for sine, and I use the same thing here. I just want to make sure what is that we should be avoiding. Okay, when you look at this values, you see, we want to make sure it is always 1, 1. If you see here, these values, they almost look alike, but which are the ones which are repeated? If you see, this is repeated here, this is half and this is half. So minus 60 and 60 gives you the same answer. I wanted to tick mark this part, and this part gives you the same answer. Then again, you will see that these two values also, minus 30, these two values, this one and these two values give the same answer. Sorry, not this one. So that means we need to somehow restrict the domain of cosine function, because the cosine function domain is everything. So if you see the cosine graph of cosine, so if you see the graph of cosine, that's how the graph of cosine starts from here 1, and then it goes through 90 pi by 2, then at pi that is minus 1, and then at 3 pi by 2, which is 270, and so on. So what we do is we restrict the domain from, because if by horizontal line test, if I draw like this, it intersects two places. That it's like at minus 60 is half, and also 60 is half. So it means suppose this is 60 here, and this is minus 60. So both 60 will give you half, and this also minus 60 will give you half. And you can clearly see that when you try to reverse it, so the second column that you see, it's the same thing where what? If you swap it or you switch it, the input output, if you become output input, so this output red color is right here, this input will become the output. So when that works, it creates a problem where half gives you two answers. See this? Half is 60 and half also is minus 60. So that means that when you try to change, so this is what, let's say y equals cosine of x. So when you change this, this is x equals cosine of y. But we want to know y in terms of x, and that's why we try to write in the inverse relation. So I will call it like relation. So inverse relation is so y has to be written in terms of x. So this thing I can write y equals cosine inverse of x. So that's the symbol used to denote. It means if I say y is cosine inverse of x, it means x is cosine of y. So now in this example, the question is this new relation or the new inverse relation. I'm not going to calling it as a function yet, because in order to relation to become a function, you want to make sure it is one, each of this input should have only one output. But right now you see this half gives you two outputs. One is 60. So there is a problem. So what we will do is we'll try to restrict. So we won't take this. I'll just get off with this negative, and I'll only start from 0. And you can see this is, it goes from here all the way down until 180. So we'll try to restrict the domain only from 0 x less than this pi, which is 180 degrees. So restricting the domain and the range, and you can clearly see the range is always of the cosine is minus 1. So the range is minus 1 less than y less than plus 1, right? So that will remain the same when you the range is becomes the domain here. Look at this domain here. So all these values which are from negative 1, and you can clearly see everything is connected like this. Look at what this. All these y's are taken care of. So when you try to reverse, swap it, you just see I'm going to take this off. So let's see whatever we don't want. So this is gone. So I'm going to restrict only from 0 all the way to 180. So 0 all the way to 180 degrees, which is pi. So when you swap it, you get these answers, and then this is 1, 1. So now this relation becomes restricting the domain of this function y equals cosine of x. Okay, so when here restricted the domain to 0 less than 180, sorry, 180. So restricting this, we get 1 function. So that's how we can, now we can say that this inverse function, so y is cosine inverse of x is inverse function of cosine function. So if this is y's cosine function, and that becomes arc is cosine inverse, or you can also write it as y equals arc cosine x. So which arc did we take? So you can see the arc that we took is, so the arc that we took is only the semicircle, all this whole thing. So this is the arc we took. So all the angles are restricted from 0 until pi. And when you do that, it covers all the numbers from 1, the maximum is 1, then it goes down √3/2, then half, then becomes 0, then become minus half, and then still becomes smaller, -3/2, and the lowest it goes is -1. So that's how we get this. So this is how cos inverse function is defined. Now the next is, let's graph. So how do we graph this? So I have a grid down there, and so what I did is, on the y-axis, because the range is from, look at this, the domain is from -1 to 1 here, because the range in this range, this one, the range was from -1 to +1. Look at this, it was from -1 to +1. Now it becomes the domain. So on the x-axis, I took -1 to +1, and on the y-axis, I took two spaces, pi/6, pi/3, pi/2, 2pi/3, and let's plug the values. Okay, I will begin from this side, the last one, that is 1. So if it is 1, the answer is 0. So that's one the point, that's 0. Then √3/2, this √3/2 is 0.85. You can check that with the calculator. So where is 0.85? I can split this into 5 parts. So it will be somewhere here 0.5. So this will be, so this is pi/6, that's this one. Then half is 60, so that's half is 60. This is pi/3, 60. Pi/2 is 0. The negative half is 2pi/3. Then again this is minus 0.85. So that becomes this one. So where is that? 1, 2, 3, and 4. So between here maybe. And here I'm gonna go right here. And -1 is, so let's write down. What did we get here? This is 1 is, so 1 is 0. This is √3/2 is pi/6. This is half is pi/3. This one is half. This one is 0 is pi/2. This one is minus half is 2pi/3. This one is, this is where that I was talking about √3/2, which is minus 0.85. This is the point plus 0.85. So let's put, I'm going to use the square root. So that's minus √3/2 is 5pi/6, which is 150 degrees. And then this point is -1 is pi. And then you graph this. So I'm going to use a green marker to show that. So the graph will look like, start from here. So this is somewhere here, closer to 9. So I want to make sure that it's closer to 9 here. And then, see how it goes. There you go. That's the graph. That's how it looks like. Beautiful graph, which is So this new is y is arccosine of x, or y equals cosine inverse of x. Okay, where the domain is, so what is the domain is, sorry, so the domain is from -1 to +1, so -1, and the range is, it goes lowest to 0, so that means this is 0, oh, let me write in the roster form, so this is minus, 0 all the way y to pi by pi, that's pi 180 degrees. Hope that helps. So, two things happened. What we seen from the unit circle, we took the one column, this one, and then I swapped it. After swapping, we realized that it was not one, it was many. So I had to restrict the domain. I took off this and I used only this data, swapped it, and realized that, hey, that's one function. So if that's a one function, I mean, that's one relation, so that one relation becomes a function. And that's why we have cos inverse exists. And we've done this, we graphed this, and now the last part of this video is y cosine inverse of x. So the next part is we'll see y. So I'm going to do analytically, let's cosine minus x, let's put it equals to cosine minus x is theta. So that's the first step. So exactly like how we did. Then by definition of inverse function, this negative x equals cosine theta. Then multiply -1 both sides. This negative will change to positive. This side will be cosine of theta. And remember the identity that cosine of minus theta is same as plus cosine theta. You know, the reason is because if you see the unit circle, this theta, then this is the x coordinate are plus. If this is theta and this is minus theta, this also is plus. So they have the same, it doesn't matter whether it's negative or positive, the angle, so still it's going to be plus, because the cosine is the x coordinate. So that's why we can write this as good as writing without the minus sign. So minus sign just vanishes. And then use the definition of cosine inverse. If x is cosine theta, then you say, okay, this is cosine inverse of x equals theta. Okay, and that part you just plug it in here. So what did we learn? Only thing I want to make sure where is our mistake. Even though this is minus cosine theta is cosine of theta, but then the question is asked is, can we take the angles? What angles are we supposed to take? So that's the question. So this one, instead of getting this, I made a slight mistake here. Watch this. This is also same as we can write, because you want the angles. Remember, the angle has to be, the answer has to be from 0 to 180. So you can't have negative angles. So what I will do is this part we will write as x equals is what is this minus cosine theta is? We can write it as cosine of 180 minus theta. So that's because if we have an angle, let me show this with the help of, what this means is, if this is theta, on the other side this also is theta. So this part, this also is theta. So if this is cosine theta, this is cosine theta, and the other side, this is, if you go all the way here, this angle is 180 minus theta. So if it is 180 minus theta, it's same as writing this theta. So this is the reference angle, which is theta, So cosine theta, this minus cosine theta is same as writing cosine of 180 minus theta. So hope that helps. And then you say, okay, use our definition. So you get cosine inverse of x equals 1 minus theta, and this is replaced by pi, and then you replace this theta right here. So cosine inverse of x equals pi minus cosine inverse of minus x. And then you can also, before that I could also, let's just add theta this side, both sides. That will be easy. So this will be theta plus cosine inverse of x equals pi, and then you subtract cosine inverse x, both sides. You get theta equals pi minus cosine inverse x. So what we learn is, if there is a minus x this way, it's always going to be pi minus cosine inverse of x. Hope that helps. So the thing is, main thing is to be confusion. Confusion is only whether we get this part, because if minus cosine theta is same as plus cosine of 180 minus theta. So hope that helps. So what was that I wanted to show is, the first step I wanted to show is why this exists. Then we saw what is the graph of the cosine inverse, and now we see why cosine inverse of minus x equal. I'm going to give a simple example here. Imagine if the question is asked, what is, just a simple example, what is cosine inverse of minus half? So cosine inverse of minus half is as good as writing is pi minus cosine inverse of half. And cosine inverse of half, what cosine of which angle is half? Is pi by 3, that's 60 degrees. So I can multiply 3 here, and this becomes 3 pi times 1 is 2 pi by 3. And this answer, whatever that answer that you get, that is, if you don't know, call it theta, this is really lies, this 2 pi by 3 is between the range 0 to pi. And that's it. Hope this helped. Thank you so much. And in the class on Monday, we will do a lot of problems based on this. Hope that helps. If you have any question, we will see on Monday. Thank you. Have a good weekend.